friends, here I take a new topic, the part 4 of brain and cranial nerves, the structures of cerebrum, the gyri and sulci. The telencephalon is the biggest compartment of brain and it gives rise to cerebrum. Cerebrum comprises of cerebral hemispheres separated by longitudinal cerebral fissures. Between the hemispheres and the cerebellum, one can distinguish the transverse cerebral fissure that separates the two compartments. Each hemisphere features the cerebral cortex, the rhinencephalon and basal nuclei. First we can see the major fissure. Here is the transverse cerebral fissure. It separates the cerebral hemisphere and cerebellum. And here is the longitudinal fissure. It separates the cerebral hemispheres. And from the telencephalon, here we can see the telencephalon. The cerebrum is formed. From the telencephalon, the cerebrum is formed. And the cerebrum has three parts: cerebral cortex, and the basal nuclei, and rhinencephalon. Here is the cerebral cortex. Here is the cerebral cortex. Yes, cerebral cortex. And here is on in the inferior side we can see here is the rhinencephalon. Here rhinencephalon, ventral view, and the basal nucleus. Here is the basal nucleus. The two hemispheres are associated by means of the corpus callosum. Here is the corpus callosum. Below we can see the fornix. Here fornix, and here is the anterior commissure. And the cerebral hemispheres has two margins and three surfaces: the inferior lateral margin, and inferior medial margin. Here is the superior lateral surface. It is the large surface attached to cranial vault. And here be the medial surface that faces the opposite hemisphere, and inferior surface. Here is the medial surface, and here is the inferior surface. Inferior surface is attached to internal cranial base, and here we can see the cerebellum and attached to cerebellum. And the cerebral cortex, it has each hemisphere features the cerebral cortex that cloaks that underline the compartments. On the surface of cortex, one can see numerous cerebral sulci that delimit the cerebral lobes, cerebral lobules, and the cerebral gyri. The word meaning of cloak is pallium, Latin. In Latin we can say in pallium, that means cloak. Okay, next we can jump into the interlobar, the relief interlobar sulci. We need to study three sulcus: lateral sulcus, central sulcus, and parieto-occipital sulcus. There will be three names we must by heart: Sylvian sulcus, Rolando sulcus, and parieto-occipital. Okay, these two need to. How do we study these two times? We make a code here. Sylvie always late. Sylvian cycle, lateral sulcus, and Rolando sulcus, Ronaldo in central position. Make a visualize that Rolando in central position, Ronaldo is in central position, Rolando central sulcus. Okay, just look in here. Here is the lateral fissure or lateral sulcus, and central sulcus, Rolando sulcus, lateral Sylvian sulcus, and parieto-occipital sulcus here. Okay. The Sylvian sulcus is the deepest one. It arises on the inferior surface of hemispheres as deep lateral fossa, then runs superiorly and laterally to separate the temporal lobe from the frontal and parietal lobe. Here we can see. Then the central sulcus. Here is the central sulcus that crosses the superior lateral face and separate the frontal and parietal lobes. Here is the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe here, and parieto-occipital sulcus here. We can see parieto-occipital sulcus. It is the shortest interlobar sulcus situated on the medial surface of hemisphere, where it is separates the parietal and occipital lobes. It's very simple. We need to study 5 lobes, and one is insula lobe is not visible from outside, and the frontal lobe, it is the biggest lobe, about 30% of entire hemisphere, and situated anterior to the central sulcus, and anteriorly it terminates with the frontal pole. Okay, just look the picture. Here is the frontal lobe, posteriorly by central sulcus, and next is parietal lobe, delimited by central and parieto-occipital sulcus. Here is the parieto-occipital sulcus, and occipital lobe is here. A small lobe delimited by the parieto-occipital sulcus. Posteriorly, it ends with a fairly pointed occipital pole. Here is the occipital pole. And temporal lobe is delimited by lateral sulcus. Inferiorly, it ends with the respective temporal pole. Here we can see temporal pole, and insula is a small lobe situated deep within the lateral sulcus. Insula fully covered by frontal, the parietal and temporal lobes, and thus not visible from the outside. We can see insula here. Here is the insula. The superior surface of frontal lobe consists precentral gyrus, superior, middle, inferior frontal gyrus, ascending ramus, and it has 3 portions: orbital part, triangular part, and opercular part. Here we can see precentral gyrus, delimited by central sulcus posteriorly and the precentral sulcus anteriorly. Here is the precentral sulcus. The gyrus crosses the lobe from top to bottom. Here is superior frontal gyrus. It runs longitudinally, being delimited by superior margin and superior frontal sulcus. Here is superior frontal sulcus. Here, superior frontal sulcus, and middle frontal gyrus. Here is the middle frontal gyrus, situated right below the superior frontal gyrus. It is bounded by superior frontal sulcus and the inferior frontal sulcus. Here is inferior frontal sulcus, and next one is inferior frontal gyrus, situated below the inferior frontal sulcus and lateral sulcus. As it reaches the inferior frontal gyrus, gives off ascending ramus and the anterior ramus. These rami separate the inferior frontal gyrus into 3 portions: orbital part, triangular part, opercular part. Here we can see ascending ramus. Here is anterior ramus. Here is posterior ramus. The orbital part of ascending ramus, here we can see here, and situated below the anterior ramus. It is continuous with the inferior surface of frontal lobe. And triangular part, here is the triangular part, situated between 2 rami. And next one is opercular part, here, situated posterior to ascending ramus. This part covers the insula. Next one is parietal lobe. The superior surface contains the structures present in the superior surface of parietal lobes are post-central gyrus, post-central sulcus, superior parietal lobule, intraparietal sulcus, inferior parietal lobule. It has 2 structures: supramarginal gyrus and angular gyrus. Postcentral gyrus here, and delimited by the central sulcus anteriorly, and postcentral sulcus here, postcentral sulcus posteriorly, and the gyrus runs in the same fashion as the precentral sulcus does. Superior parietal lobule, here is the superior parietal lobule, enclosed between the superior margin and intraparietal sulcus. The latter runs in the middle of the lobe, parallel to the superior margin. Next one is inferior parietal lobule. Inferior parietal lobule situated below the intraparietal sulcus. Here we can see inferior parietal lobule. It has two gyri, supramarginal gyrus here and angular gyrus. Supramarginal gyrus closes the lateral sulcus. Here is the lateral sulcus posteriorly. Closes the lateral sulcus supramarginal gyrus closes the lateral sulcus posteriorly, and angular gyrus here situated somewhat posterior to supramarginal gyrus, and the gyrus closes the posterior end of superior temporal sulcus. Here is the posterior temporal gyrus. We can show here postcentral gyrus here, and postcentral sulcus, and superior parietal lobule, and intraparietal sulcus, and supramarginal gyrus and angular gyrus. Here is the parieto-occipital sulcus. We can see here is the superior temporal sulcus. Next, the structures present in the superior surface of temporal lobe: superior, middle and inferior temporal gyrus, superior and inferior temporal sulcus, Heschel's gyri or transverse temporal gyri. We need to study the term Heschel's gyri, so make a quote here. He travels to temperate countries. Heschel travels transverse. Temperate means temporal gyri, and we can see here transverse temporal gyri is only internal surface, seen only in internal surface, and here be the insular gyri. Superior temporal gyrus situated below the lateral sulcus inferiorly. The gyrus is delimited by the superior temporal sulcus. On the internal surface of the gyrus, one can see the transverse temporal gyri or Heschel's gyri. We can see here middle temporal gyrus delimited by superior and inferior temporal sulci, and inferior temporal gyrus here situated below the inferior temporal sulcus. Next one is the superior lateral surface of occipital lobe. There will be only a variable gyri only present. Then insula, in insula it is delimited from the insula gyri. Insula is delimited from the neighboring lobes by circular sulcus of insula, known as it contains the insular gyri. Here we can see insular gyri. Then medial surface contains singular gyrus, medial frontal gyrus, paracentral lobule, precuneus and cuneus. Make a quote. Cut cake piece and piece in middle. First letter CU, cuneus, then cingulate, then piece, paracentral lobule, precuneus. Next P. M for medial frontal gyrus. Okay, let's look into medial surface. The on the medial surface formed by the all lobes, for except for the insula, one can distinguish the following sulci and gyri: the cingulate gyrus, that cingulate gyrus encircles the corpus callosum. Here is the corpus callosum. Here is the cingulate gyrus within dimensions of the frontal and parietal lobes. Inferiorly, it is bounded by sulcus of corpus callosum. It is a sulcus of corpus callosum, and it is the sulcus of cingulate. The gyrus eventually loops around the splenium of the corpus callosum. Here is the splenium of corpus callosum. Loops around the splenium of corpus callosum. Immediately after it, it narrows to form isthmus of cingulate gyrus. Here is the isthmus of cingulate gyrus. That in turn becomes continuous with the parahippocampal gyrus. Here is the parahippocampal gyrus. The anterior portion of gyrus situated below the rostrum of corpus callosum. We can see here is the rostrum of callosum. This area is known as subcallosal area. It is covered by subcallosal area is covered by paleocortex. The next is gyrus frontalis medialis, situated above the cingulate gyrus. Then paracentral lobule here. Paracentral lobule here. A small quadrangular portion of the frontal lobe situated posterior to the medial frontal gyrus. Anteriorly, it is bounded by the precentral gyrus, and posteriorly by the marginal branch of cingulate gyrus. Here we can see the marginal branch of cingulus gyrus. And upon reaching the posterior border of corpus callosum, the marginal branch arches upward and reaches the superior margin of hemisphere. The paracentral lobule, here is the area where the precentral and postcentral gyri join. In a paracentral lobule, the precentral and the postcentral gyri join. And the next one is precuneus. Here is the precuneus. Is a bigger quadrangular area related to parietal lobe. It features 3 boundaries, but most of others are only 2 or 1. It is a special consideration, and it has 3 boundaries. And the marginal branch of cingulate sulcus, here anteriorly, and parieto-occipital sulcus. Here is the parieto-occipital sulcus posteriorly, and subparietal sulcus here, subparietal sulcus inferiorly. It is the boundary. And then next is cuneus. Here will be the cuneus, and the triangular area related to the occipital lobe. It is bounded by parieto-occipital sulcus anteriorly here, and by the calcareous sulcus. Here is the calcareous sulcus here. Calcareous sulcus posteriorly, it runs slantways to reach the occipital pole. Occipital pole we can see here. Then next one is inferior surface. Inferior surface, frontal lobe has straight and orbital gyri, and parietal lobe has parahippocampal gyri, and occipital lobe has lingual gyrus, medial and lateral occipitotemporal gyrus. Here we can see the gyrus rectus, and it is bounded by longitudinal fissure medially and laterally by the olfactory sulcus, where it is the olfactory tracts are passed. Then orbital gyri here appears as some small gyri adjacent to the superior orbital wall. Then the parietal parietal lobe has parahippocampal gyrus, and it is situated on the intromedial margin of hemisphere within the dimensions of the temporal lobe. It is bounded by the hippocampal sulcus. Here is the hippocampal sulcus. With a featured dentate gyrus, and medially and the rhinal sulcus. Rhinal sulcus is a continuation of the collateral. Here be the rhinal sulcus is a continuation of collateral sulcus. Here we can see collateral sulcus, and anteriorly parahippocampal gyrus terminates with uncus. We can see here uncus, the parahippocampal gyrus, and related cingulate gyrus with the isthmus form limbic lobe. This totally full portion is known as total violet full portion is known as limbic lobe. We can see here this violet portion is known as limbic lobe. And lingual gyrus. Here we can see lingual gyrus situated posterior to isthmus of cingulate gyrus. Here is the isthmus of cingulate gyrus, and posterior to cingulate gyrus, posterior to the isthmus of cingulate gyrus. It is bounded by the calcareous sulcus superiorly and the collateral sulcus inferiorly. This rather deep sulcus runs along both occipital and temporal lobes to become continuous with the rhinal sulcus. Medial occipital temporal. Here medial occipital temporal gyrus is bounded by collateral sulcus. Here we can see collateral sulcus. Above and below is the superior. Below is superior occipital temporal sulcus. We can see here occipital temporal sulcus. Here we can see not superior. Here we can see just only sulcus, occipital temporal. Here is the inferior lateral margin, and the lateral occipital temporal gyrus situated laterally from the medial occipital temporal gyrus, and thus bounded by the occipital temporal sulcus above. Above we can see the occipital temporal sulcus, and below is the inferior lateral margin of hemisphere that delimits the inferior temporal gyrus and the lateral occipital temporal gyrus. Okay student, okay friends, I think this video will helps to you. Make a comment if you have any suggestions. Then if you like this video, please like this video, and for updated videos you can use bell icon and subscribe my channel. Thank you friends. Bye.